Hi there. Welcome to Stories, a podcast by Acadium where we focus on the stories of our incredible users. People come to Acadium for a few different reasons. They might be looking to build new skills, whether that's for a career change or just to deepen their craft, or they might be looking to get some eager extra hands on their project or business. In any case, people come to Acadium to grow, and we find that our users often have amazing stories to tell about their journeys, and we're here to share them. Our guest today is Norman Matos. Norman is a graduate of Cornell University. He currently works a full-time job at DataCore, and he is an apprentice on Acadium. I'm looking forward to chatting with Norman today about his experience in university, what he learned, what he didn't learn, and how he thinks about learning today to try and hit his goals. Norman, thanks for joining us, man.
Yeah, anytime. Guess I can go straight into the story of my journey through university, and then just go riff off from there.
That would be awesome. Yeah, tell us about how you decided that you wanted to go to Cornell and how you decided what you wanted to study there.
Right. So I guess in order to go into the story of how I decided on Cornell, it goes back to my high school experience, where it was just okay, we've got one crowd where some folks are trying to copy my homework, and then there's the other crowd where it's just okay, I've got some study buddies that can actually help me understand all the things that I need to do to understand in order to actually get ahead of my grades and all that stuff. So my experiences with both sort of populations in high school told me that I should probably seek out more of the smarter folk, more of the nerds who are just willing to hunker down in the library for or conference room for however many hours to actually figure stuff out. So that's where I kind of looked at the averages of the SAT scores and the GPAs of every college that I was considering. And I was just that seems like a place for me. So of course Cornell came on that list because it's just surrounded by smarter people, you would assume. So that's pretty much how I decided on applying. And then when I applied, I was just okay, cool. I'm this guy from a low income family who's just trying his darnest to get into this random organization that I have no idea if they'll get back to me or not. And they eventually do, which was a hell of a surprise. I get a very fancy envelope in the mail. It says you got in, and I'm just cool. So I'm taking this now. It was
That's amazing.
Yeah. It was pretty surreal when I got that envelope. My friends were a lot more excited than I was because I was still in shock that this was happening. But that's kind of that story. I guess if I go more into just my kind of university experience, once I'm on the campus and experiencing all the things, first off, choosing a major, I was in the engineering school at Cornell. So I was initially going to go the science and math route. But then after a couple of experiences in the lab, I was just you know what, maybe I should focus on one of them. So I decided to focus on the math aspect of it. And there was a major at Cornell, operations research and engineering, which allowed me to use my math whiz skills that I thought I had in order to kind of do some more complex things. So that's kind of how I went about choosing a major. But reflecting back, it was just I was kind of afraid that I wouldn't be able to do the science and math thing. So I chose to do just the math thing, even though I'm interested in both. So that's where, it's not that I have regrets there, but it's more if I had a dad who could tell me and be hard with me about what's possible, then he'd probably tell me why'd you quit so fast? You could have just done a lot more. But moving forward into that, the major, it worked out pretty well. I was interested in all the things that I was learning. It's essentially a major because operations research is not a term that's thrown around very well or very much. But the idea is use data analytics in a very complicated, fancy fashion in order to put forth optimal decisions for various problems that have been seen before. That's what mathematics is very good for. Just you've seen a problem before, you've modeled it before in such a way, and you have a whole set of tools to kind of solve that same problem that you've seen before. I thought about going into research, but I was just I can't. My financial situation said otherwise. Because I remember freshman year was like the toughest for me. So I ended up having to take a couple extended courses like over the summer, and I had to take on a couple debts for that. And I was just like, yeah. After I graduated, my first priority was paying off that debt, so I was not going to go into grad school or anything like that. But that's just like my personal preference. I'm very risk averse or debt averse, which very like that rolls into just like how I think about education is just like the best way to do it. I feel is just to like have a couple projects that you can act on with your own resources using Google searches. Like that's the optimal way to kind of like delve into whatever thing that you want to delve into, or at least how I think about delving into something. But then
I'd
along the
love
way,
to, sorry to
yeah,
interrupt. I'd love to get into that in a minute. Before we get too much further along, one thing that comes to mind for me is this major that you chose at this excellent university seems like it would probably set you up quite well for the world. Like,
mm,
desirable place to be, graduating from Cornell with a degree that helps you make sense of large amounts of information and help people make decisions. What did you not learn in university?
yeah, that's a very good question. I guess if I had to think about it, it's more like the soft skills with respect to managing your own career and sort of how to use all the projects and basically how to sell yourself, like all the career things. But I can't say they didn't teach you that. It was more like it wasn't a priority. It's like they offered the services to do so. Um, so my trouble was in like back then, I was just desperate to get whatever job through the door so that I could pay off this debt. That was kind of like my priority. And then thinking about like what I was missing from the general college experience was just someone to guide me and say, hey, maybe instead of focusing on paying off this debt, maybe you should also focus on actually having a career that you're interested in. Because all the internships that I did, I was very interested in. But when it came down to like choosing a company, I was I basically looked at the options that came through the door first. Within the first 2 months that I was like doing the whole career process in my senior year, I looked at I guess the three different offers that I had, and I chose the best one out of them. Not to say that it wasn't like lucrative in and of itself. It just didn't use all the things that I had learned in my major, so to speak. So that's why when I speak to my career experience, it starts off with me doing project management and analytics company, not necessarily doing analytics itself, but sort of using the skills that I had done on the side, outside of my courses and outside the college experience, or I guess it's part of the college experience, honestly, to actually go into a whole bunch of clubs and develop your skills outside of the coursework that you're doing. So, to that sense, the college experience really gave me the things that allowed me to have a separate career aside from what I learned in class.
That makes
But
sense.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I pick up on you saying, in college you have this opportunity to enroll in these clubs and try to learn these things that you might not be learning in the classroom. I think for a
exactly.
lot of people, once you get into the world of jobs, they think of sort of the place that career development happens as being on the job. But I look at you and I see all these different certifications that you've taken. You've enrolled in this MBA with Quantic, and you're doing an apprenticeship on Acadium. It sort of feels like you're applying a similar thing to your career right now.
Correct. Yes. I've gotten into a habit of going outside my coursework, so to speak, and sort of branching out into other aspects of what a career could be. So all these certifications that I've done, be it on Quantic through the MBA or through Udacity and its certifications or through Acadium, this is all exploratory work that I'm doing to figure out just where my strengths lie, but also to get a bit of like a taste of every sort of career that could be. Um, and it's also very good, I feel like, because one of the things that I want to be able to do in the future, be it when I'm 40, 50, or even 30, is to see a problem and generate all the resources to solve it, be it an organization, nonprofit or for profit, or be it an initiative, a Twitter hashtag, what have you. Just having the skills that are needed from marketing. That's why I'm on Acadium, to all the businessy aspects of it. That's why I took the Quantic MBA. So all the things that would be required to like get my word out there through the internet. That's why I did some Udacity courses. Just all of those things that would kind of work together to build on some initiative. That's kind of how I think about what I'm doing outside of my 9 to 5. It's just like, what skills do I need in order to fill the gap of all the things that I would need if I wanted to initiate some random initiative to solve a problem.
So I know that you have a full-time job right now, and you're balancing all these things outside of that job through Acadium, Quantic, courses on Udacity. The full-time job is paid. None of these other things are paid. How do you think about that for yourself in terms of an investment of your own time?
Yeah, yeah. It's basically opportunity cost. So I like to think of it as, what are the alternatives? The alternatives to these free experiences are paid experiences, like uh, getting a master's at another university, for example. If I take into account all the costs of getting a master's, it's the cost of not working. So that's like lost revenue right there. And then it's also the cost of tuition. So considering those costs, that's like the one alternative that's like double because you're losing out on revenue. And then I'm considering the other alternatives where I don't have to pay tuition, and I can still keep my full time job, so I can keep the revenue source. All I have to do is spend a couple more hours during the day. So, in that respect, there is, like, in terms of which costs less, if you consider the revenue that's not being paid out to you when you go out and do these full time things, that's a huge cost. So getting a free initiative that I can do on the side while I get some revenue through the door through my full time job, that's the ideal. But then there's also the third alternative where I'm doing a part time like program through, I don't know, some another random university. Again, there's a tuition cost there, so I'll still have the revenue, but then there's more costs. So of those three alternatives that I mentioned, having a part-time job and doing a free thing that's unpaid is the ideal. So when I look at a program where, like, for example, I am essentially doing a part-time like job through Acadium, but it's not being paid. I translate that as a learning experience, a learning program, a degree of sorts. It's not necessarily I am doing work and not getting paid for it. It's more so I am learning something new and not paying for it. That's where I see it as a deal.
And are you highly selective about, like, I think about apprenticeships, for example, where oftentimes we see people saying, I want to learn this specific thing, and we match them with a business who says, I've got work on that specific thing. Let's work together. For you, you articulated this goal of wanting to, I don't want to call it start your own company. I sort of see it as solving a problem, like putting together the resources required to some kind of for some kind to solve some kind of a problem that interests you or inspires you in some way. Because of that goal that you have, are you super selective about how you figure out what skills you want to acquire, or is it just an evaluation process whenever an opportunity presents itself to learn something new, where you sort of weigh that against, time spent on things that are paying you right now, time spent on learning other things? How do you think about that?
Yeah, yeah. I'd say I'm very selective, but to the extent that I can contribute. So if I'm looking at a whole bunch of potential opportunities that have been put forth to me, I'm thinking to myself, how can I contribute on this? How can I contribute on that? And then how does that relate to what I want to be doing in the future? So if I get an opportunity to, say, organize a couple of partnerships with a whole bunch of organizations or a whole bunch of marketers in order to design some kind of marketing vehicle, that sounds like an awesome skill. And if it seems like that would be lucrative, then I go for it. And then in terms of like other criteria, there's not really much other criteria I would consider aside from whether or not the organization is doing something that you find interesting. That's another key criteria that I use. It's just like, if you're not passionate about the work that they're doing, then you're probably not going to have as fun a time. So I kind of make that as a priority as well.
That makes sense. I'd be curious to know if there are any. What skills you don't have today that you would really like to have, or that you're focused on acquiring in sort of the
Oh
near
yeah,
term?
yeah, yeah. So a couple of the skills is just like automation, like automating the sales and marketing pipelines that are being developed. Just go designing the automated experience that a potential prospect runs through. That's something that I'm actually going to work on the current apprenticeship that I'm doing. So that's one. A couple other things on my list include creating the marketing collateral, copywriting, just the whole gambit of things that would be behind a marketing initiative to get the word out about someone's product or your own solution to a problem.
It sounds like marketing is the theme. I know you sort of already explained this a little bit, but is it fair to say that you sort of think about tackling these things categorically? Like, okay, marketing is this next thing that I need to learn more about. What are all the different things I want to learn? Where are the opportunities? And then just pursue that until you feel sort of like you're in a position where you'd be comfortable to run marketing at a company or an organization.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. One question that I think could be interesting to hear your thoughts on. And no pressure if there's no sort of like full answer for this one. But I think it's super relevant. Right now, I know a lot of people who've been laid off and they're thinking about this time right now to try and reskill themselves. Maybe they've been in a job that they didn't really love, or they're trying to make a transition and they're sort of seeing this as an opportunity to make that transition. As someone who's taken advantage of a lot of free online resources to try and upskill yourself, what kind of advice would you give to those people who are in that position right now?
I'd say number one, look through the skills that you already have and figure out whether or not there's a way to get people to pay for that before you look into some other learning resource, because money is king. If you can get revenue through the door, that's beautiful. But if you don't have those skills yet, then I would prioritize sort of the low hanging fruit, so to speak. So like if you have a background in computer science, you're not going to go into marketing. You're probably going to go into like a coding boot camp, in order to get more credentials that say, hey, I can probably code something up for you. Likewise, if you study business, you'd probably go down some marketing platform like Acadium and be able to learn and do stuff from that. So it's kind of like focusing on what you have learned before in order to sort of push your career forward. Now, let's say you're starting from ground zero. Well, it's a blessing and a curse, because then it's just like you get to explore whatever you like. I personally prefer managing logistics before anything. Like if you can learn to manage a project, that's applicable to basically anything. So that's like if you're starting from like ground zero, that's probably where I would start. Just like a whole bunch of certifications that you can get in various project management type of frameworks, so to speak. That's where I'd like prioritize if you were like starting from ground zero.
That makes a lot of sense. Set the foundation for yourself first. How do you think about the evolution of your career for yourself? I know that you've mentioned, we've come back to this a few times, this idea of like, you know, wanting to be able to assemble these resources to solve some kind of a problem. How do you think about timing for things like that? Is it a big master plan, or do you sort of just take it one step at a time and accept things that excite you? And we've sort of talked about this from a how do I acquire new skills perspective, but in terms of like where you're earning an income for yourself and where you're focusing the majority of your time, how do you think about that?
Yeah. So I think I like to think about it as creating opportunities for yourself, not necessarily like going for one particular thing, but it's more like creating the situations in which things can fall on your lap. So if I am like, let's say I have developed a whole like when you're considering the planning for 5 plus years, 10 plus years, it's important to consider what your passions are before you go into any particular initiative. But then once you actually engage in those passions, then when friends of yours or people in your network reach out and say, hey, I need something in this, and this equals skill that you've learned in the past that you're passionate about, and that's when your career kind of starts to come together. So it's a combination of one, just learning more and becoming an expert at what you're passionate about, and then two, after that, seeing what opportunities are out there that are in the things that you've learned. So it's more like a kind of active passive approach. Active in terms of reaching out and learning all the things that you want to learn, but then passive in terms of seeking out opportunities, just like making sure that you have a decent network, which you can get from various platforms, Udacity, Quantic, and Acadium included, and just making sure you have your ear to the ground as to what opportunities are out there.
Sounds almost like you're building a cycle for yourself where you identify these things that you want to learn, you learn the foundation, and then you focus immediately on trying to apply those things. And then over time, within your network, people will almost sort of like associate you with those skills. And because you've placed it on something that you're really interested in, that creates this sort of virtuous cycle for yourself, because people sort of reach out to you to learn those things for resources, maybe for projects if they have some kind of problem that they want to solve, and then that can kind of bloom into all sorts of different interesting opportunities for yourself. One last question for you, so I don't want to take too much of your time here. If you were today to decide that you wanted to go start your own thing, what would the problem be that you would want to solve?
That's a very, very, very good question. One of the things that's been top of my mind is just like how I walk through kind of the entire university process, and I can't say that I had a full understanding of what I was doing. And I feel like if I had done more prep work in the past, like in high school, which is a very easy thing to do, and what other high school students in the country could possibly do if they have the resources, just making sure that there's sort of an equal balance there. Because like I remember thinking to myself, what do I want to do when I am 70? And I thought to myself, teacher or young mentor for young people. And the main reason for that is because I understand and experienced myself that there is an imbalance between all of the resources and experiences of high school students out there, high school students, middle school students, what have you. So kind of like smoothing out the gaps in those economic opportunities. That's kind of what I want to work on, or what I'm passionate about. In terms of how specifically, I haven't figured it out yet. I'll probably figure it out within the next, I don't know, 10 years. But until then, that's like the general overarching view of what problem I need to solve.
So basically balancing the scales in a certain sense, making sure that we flatten out the barrier to entry for people all across the United States and other countries for access to different opportunities and information around how they should or could think about life after high school. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, I hope you figure that out. I think you're a good person to think about it, man.
Thanks. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
we trying out here.
Yeah, man. Yeah. It's awesome to see. Thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate you taking half an hour to chat with us and share some insights. I know I learned a lot, and hopefully the people listening learned a few things as well. I'm sure they did.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy to anytime.
Thanks, Norman.